This month on Focus, Black Oklahoma, we reveal the newest legislative efforts to push the school voucher agenda.
Highlight the People's Council for Criminal Justice Reform and their efforts to improve Oklahoma County's jail system.
Explore the findings of a recently published report on the growth of wealth inequality across the globe and how it impacts Oklahoma.
Unearth the findings of a new documentary film called Oaklawn about the search for Tulsa Race Massacre victims. Reflect on what global drag superstars and some local voices think about the meaning of Black excellence.
All this and more on Focus, Black Oklahoma.
Focus Black Oklahoma is sponsored by OKC MOA's Fighters for Freedom, William H. Johnson Picturing Justice exhibition through May 14th, celebrating Black activists, their challenges, and accomplishments. More at okcmoa.com.
This is Focus Black Oklahoma. I'm Jacob Littlebear.
And I'm Kuma Roberts.
No matter what you call it, a voucher or a tax credit, the end result is defunding our state's public education system. Anthony Cherry talks with two state lawmakers about the current legislative session and the bills regarding school vouchers.
Education vouchers have had many names: opportunity scholarships, choice scholarships, and as of late, they are being labeled by Oklahoma conservative lawmakers as a tax credit. Each year, Oklahoma's legislature allocates a specific amount of public money for each public student in the state to be educated. That money is used to pay teachers, pay security guards, purchase technology, maintain facilities, and a myriad of other expenses and budget items. Voucher programs allow these publicly allocated funds to follow the child to any institution the family chooses, even if it's homeschooling. The logic is rooted in the claims that privatization of public education is more cost-effective, more innovative, and more efficient. Vouchers reduce government involvement and oversight in efforts to improve schooling, in part because the free market is expected to improve public schools. Advocates for voucher programs also argue that the quality of education for disadvantaged students will improve when faced with private competition for public dollars. While studies in the first large-scale voucher program in Milwaukee in the 1990s and others in Indiana and Louisiana have shown no statistically significant effects on voucher users' math or language arts test scores, Oklahoma is on the verge of becoming the next case study. Historically, the concept of separation of church and state has prevented public dollars from going to private schools and institutions. In state referendums, the public has consistently opposed vouchers. University of Chicago economist Milton Friedman introduced the idea of school vouchers in 1955. It was part of a larger school choice strategy designed to counter court-mandated integration after the Brown versus Board of Education decision of 1954. Catholic schools also favored vouchers in their fight to access public coffers in the 1950s. According to proponents, vouchers promise to improve consumer choice and competition. The goal is to make education systems function more like markets. Advocates of the free market are proponents of the voucher programs. Schools are pitted in competition with each other for students and the money allocated per student. Former President Ronald Reagan's administration supported vouchers at the federal level, but was unable to get Congress on board. Congress was reluctant to spend public funds on private schools. On February 16, 2023, Oklahoma House Democrats sounded what they believed to be an alarm when it came to an impending public education funding crisis. House Bill 1935 aims to give a $5,000 voucher under the title of a tax credit to Oklahoma families who want to send their children to private schools. Regina Goodwin represents House District 73. Her district includes Booker T. Washington High School. She currently serves on several committees such as Business and Commerce, Public Safety, Appropriations and Budget, and Transportation.
And that's per child. So the family can get $5,000 for this child, $5,000 for the other child. You know what I mean? So it's cumulative. And so that's why we know this has nothing to do with the tax credit. This is a gift. This is a scholarship. This is a voucher. And it is designed to incentivize lure people away from public schools.
Melissa Provenzano represents House District 79 in Tulsa, which she describes as the Woodland Hills Mall and St. Francis Hospital area. She serves on the Common Education Committee, the Judiciary Committee, and others in the House.
You get this $5,000 voucher, that doesn't cover tuition for a lot of private schools. And so only those families that can make up the difference in the tuition, plus textbooks on top of that, plus your cheer uniform, plus going on a field trip, plus paying for your lunch, plus how you're going to get there. So this is a lovely coupon for the rich, but your lower and middle class don't really have a choice. They'll need to continue to go to the public schools. That's what we need to fund with our tax dollars.
Representatives Goodwin and Provenzano speak on what they believe is the intent of the latest Oklahoma voucher bill championed by the state's leading Republicans. First, we hear from Goodwin, then Provenzano, and then Goodwin again.
So a bill is an idea, and a legislator or chair, leader will bring a certain bill to committee. And this had come to Appropriations and Budget. So this was our first hearing it. And actually, I think we got it probably 10 minutes before we had to debate it and discuss it, which kind of speaks to the process also. So it cleared out a committee, and then the next step will be to move it on to the House floor. And then we'll have to move over to the Senate side. But right now we're in the House of Representatives, so we're seeing it first, unfortunately.
And so, and I think there's this prevailing belief that public dollars should not fund public education. And so everything you've seen over the last few years has been to demoralize parents, demoralize teachers, demoralize kids. Your public schools are bad. And that's couldn't be further from the truth. We haven't funded them. We haven't supported them in the way that we can. But, this plus the companion bill that does put some additional dollars into public schools definitely tells you we've got the money to do it, and the time is right to invest in our public schools. But here we're taking a third of the money that they're talking about and putting it into this private school bucket.
So this legislation, it fits right into the mode, right, of decimating our public schools. And quite frankly, they really don't care. It's laughable, really, when they're like, this bill is so that all of our children will be treated equitably. And they're not talking about all of our children. And even when I talked about Black and brown children that are predominantly educated in our public schools, right? They said, oh, this has nothing to do with Black and brown. Of course it does. Sure.
Oklahomans have historically voted down voucher bills. Representative Provenzano explains why this session's voucher bill is different.
The interesting concern is that our rural legislators have really held the line when it comes to the word voucher. But all of a sudden we've called it a tax credit, and all of a sudden they're on board. But the math is the same. We're all paying into our taxes. Half of your budget for the state comes into public education. It's going to be impacted. It's a voucher. Anything that reduces the fund for public education and puts it into private is a voucher. The interesting thing is these private school parents can use this money, and not to detract from private school parents. They've made the choice and the responsibility and the financial burden that comes with that. But this money they can spend any number of ways with very little accountability. And so you could pay as a private school parent for your AP class out of this $5,000, but a public school parent can't. So the inequity just rolls on top.
Representative Goodwin reflects on how the education policy has evolved or devolved during her time in office.
When I had walked into the Capitol some 8 years ago, they were talking about dismantling the State Department of Education.
Yes.
There is a target on the State Department of Education and public schools as we know them. So what is happening is the ramifications are children in Oklahoma are not going to be educated properly. What we should be concerned about in terms of our workforce and how our children are taught, that is going to be limited and even more deficient, because if you don't fund it properly, then what do you expect? Yet they cut the funding and then they start putting, bullseyes on everybody, like, oh, bad public school, bad superintendent, bad teachers, bad parents, and it's all propaganda. And so the ramifications are we're going to have a more illiterate society. The ramifications are we're not going to have folks that are ready for the workforce. We're not going to have folks that are college ready. And all because there are some Republicans that are having their way, and it's their day. And Oklahoma is not better for it. So those are the ramifications. And if we think that that benefits us as a state, then I guess we've been miseducated.
As the bill progresses through the Oklahoma legislature, Representatives Provenzano and Goodwin are committed to keeping their constituents up to speed on the changes and the ramifications for Oklahoma schools.
And then you look at the companion bill to this particular bill, and even how they're distributing the $500 million in that bill is inequitable, because you have $300 million of that goes to every single public school district, and the cap is $2 million. Everybody gets $2 million, period. Well, any school district, which is about 24 statewide, that has more than like 4,700 students, that bucket of money becomes quite smaller. In Oklahoma City, it's about $61 per student if you just pass out $21. And our suburban 6A schools are going to be feeling this heat. They're doing the math right now, and they're figuring it out. And we've heard from a number of them already that, hey, it's not just Tulsa and Oklahoma City that's going to be getting less here. It's your larger population schools.
The bottom line is there's a hole in the bucket as it relates to public education, because as Representative Provenzano has said, that the money is not going to be equitably shared. If you have more students in more heavily populated areas, and typically you're dealing with Black and brown students in the larger urban areas.
One of the many ramifications of this legislation in Oklahoma includes changes to how students with special needs are treated if they make the public to private transition. Private schools are not required to accept or accommodate special education students. According to J.G. Chambers and his Special Education Expenditure Project, his annual report found that the average additional per pupil cost for special education services offered at private schools was roughly 5 times greater each year, and the same figure for special education programs offered within public schools. Inflation must be calculated into this equation.
Public schools by law have to take everybody. That includes special education kids. If they live in your district, they're attending your school, and you're responsible for providing the resources so they can be successful. In the body of this bill, parents of special education students have to give up their IEP and IDEA rights in order to attend the private school that they're given the credit for.
Both Provenzano and Goodwin speak on their concerns regarding a lack of accountability if this voucher bill passes.
So when we give money to public schools, academic accountability, we are measured by a far more rigorous standard than private schools. They have their own accreditation track, they have their own standards, but we're giving them, this bucket of money and saying, go for it.
Now, how equitable is that? And they had the audacity to say this is about equity for all of our children. It's ridiculous. It's despicable, the language that they're using. And anybody that has a little bit of sense knows that this is a scheme, and this is what they've been angling to do for a long time. This is a really horrendous bill, a really great misuse of public dollars as it relates to educating all of our children.
The Democratic caucus argues that House Bill 1935 comes down to equity. Here's Representative Goodwin.
First of all, if you look at the median income, Black to white, in Oklahoma, you know that the median income is greater for white counterparts as opposed to Black folks. When you look at the cost of the house, or the where you're living, the environment where you're living, the ad valorem taxes that are happening, that are generated in that community, common sense and data shows us that there's a disparity when it comes to Black folks, Hispanic folks, white folks, Native Americans. So that's data. So for anybody to again say, oh, this has nothing to do with Black and brown, this absolutely favors white folks, right? As they try to decimate our public schools, they're trying to drive traffic to private schools, which is what they've always wanted to do. So that is why the time is right now. I don't think that any time is a time to do wrong. However, this is how they're proceeding.
The voucher question boils down to how Oklahoma feels politically about the role and responsibility of the state in improving education. It also comes down to how ingrained the free market ideology has become in the state's public institutions, not just in the industry of education, but also mental health, law enforcement, sanitation, and even corrections in prisons. Are Oklahomans willing to continue to give private institutions and corporations full access to not only public coffers, but to the futures and livelihoods of its citizens? For Focus, Black Oklahoma, I'm Anthony Cherry in Tulsa.
Since the Occupy Wall Street protests in 2011, there's been a growing focus on the disparity between the wealthiest 1% of Americans and the other 99% of the population. A recently published report demonstrates how wealth inequality is a global issue that has been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. Nick Alexandrov details how the effects can be measured here in Oklahoma.
Polycrises, these mega crises facing our world today.
Higher prices.
For the first time in 25 years, extreme wealth and extreme poverty have increased simultaneously.
2023 will mark 3 years since COVID-19 entered our lives.
I'm Nabil Ahmed. I'm the Director of Economic Justice at Oxfam America.
Oxfam, the anti-poverty organization, published a new report in January. It's called Survival of the Richest, and it asks alarming questions.
Crises, surely they shouldn't have winners, right? A pandemic shouldn't have winners.
Oxfam argues they do.
Let's just look at the world's richest 1%. If you take just the start of this decade, just the 2020s, the 1%, they've captured nearly 2/3 of all new wealth. Do you know what that means? That means they've captured more than double what the 99% of the rest of the world have got put together.
That capture creates striking inequality.
Pick 81 people, 81 billionaires. Today, they own more wealth than half the world, nearly 4 billion people put together.
Pick a billionaire like Harold Hamm, the Oklahoma City oilman. He's number 54 on the Forbes list of the world's richest people, and his wealth shot up from $2.4 billion in 2020 to $27 billion in February 2023. Hamm, who never responded to our interview request, took Continental Resources, the oil and gas firm he founded in 1967, private last November. He relayed his motivations in an interview with Bloomberg.
You have to do what the market wants when you're public, and that's for sure. So the freedoms of these private, they have more freedom than we do.
Hamm and his family owned 83% of Continental's stock before gaining full control. The largest minority investor, the largest stakeholder in that remaining 17%, was based in Phoenix.
I'm Bill Smead. I am the chairman and CIO of Smead Capital Management.
Last June, Smead commented on Hamm's decision to take Continental private. His words made headlines. Business and energy publications focused on Smead's use of the term steal, as in, by going private, Hamm was trying to steal the firm from shareholders. I asked Smead to comment.
Well, the rest of the quote, he's stealing the company because the stock market isn't treating his shares the way he thinks they deserve. And we agreed with him on that. The stealing comment got blown out of proportion because the people that read it never connected it to the next thought.
However you see Smead's remarks or Hamm's decision, the concept of acceptable theft, of stealing in the course of business dealings, connects to another Oklahoma billionaire, George Kaiser. His Kaiser Francis Oil Company, a Guyman jury determined in 2001, had engaged in unfair payment practices for 18 years. The penalty, the Tulsa World reported at the time, was a $73 million payout to 1,700 royalty owners in Beaver and Texas counties. 2 decades later, Kaiser's wealth is multiplying, from $5.6 billion in 2020 to $13.9 billion in February 2023. He got a windfall just weeks after Russia's February 24th invasion of Ukraine last year. On April 13th, Accelerate Energy, the liquefied natural gas firm that Kaiser controls, completed its initial public offering. This offering came as European countries, reliant on Russian gas, were seeking new sources, and it netted Kaiser $1.4 billion. For Oxfam's Nabil Ahmed, bonanzas like these warrant scrutiny.
We looked at 95 energy and food corporations. 76% of them increased their profit margins. They made over $300 billion in windfall profits in 2022. This wasn't normal. Their profits actually increased by more than 2.5 times in 2022 compared with the average of the 3 years before. And we have to square up these numbers and remember that they are boosting their profit margins, they're lining the pockets of billionaires, and at the same time, everyday folks right across the country and across the world are struggling to pay for gas at the pump.
While Blacks comprise about 10% of the Tulsa metro, they only own about 1.25% of businesses.
To better understand what inequality looks like in one part of Oklahoma, I called a Norman-based expert.
My name is Ajeen Lee. I'm an assistant professor of regional and city planning here at the University of Oklahoma.
Dr. Lee co-authored Oil and Blood, a November 2021 report published by Duke University. It looks at the racial wealth gap in Tulsa and compares that gap to the same divide in other U.S. cities.
What was really significant and pronounced in Tulsa was that this racial wealth gap was so much higher than in other cities. On average, we found that Blacks had less than 10% of the wealth of whites. And on average in the other cities, so DC, Boston, LA, Miami, that average is 28 to 41% of the wealth of whites. And so what we describe in the report is that this, we believe, is partly from the incredible shock of the Tulsa massacre that really targeted Blacks.
Nabil Ahmed describes today's global inequality in similar terms as
the story of historic, systemic racism from slavery all the way to the foreclosure crisis to today that marginalizes Black Americans.
And he stresses the point that present disparities aren't inevitable. To break up this system, Oxfam offers 3 solutions.
1, let's talk about putting in place one-off solidarity wealth taxes on the very, very richest people and windfall taxes on those largest corporations. 2nd, let's get permanent. We need to talk about permanently increasing the taxes on the very, very richest in society. And thirdly, if we really want to make a difference in addressing these extreme inequalities that we see right now, we need to talk about taxing wealth. What does that mean? It means inheritance, property, land taxes, net wealth taxes. Again, looking at those at the very top, at the 1%.
Whether that 1% owns the future is an open question. For Focus, Black Oklahoma, I'm Nick Alexandrov in Tulsa.
Focus Black Oklahoma is sponsored by the Black Church Traditions and African American Faith Life program at Phillips Theological Seminary, offering a master's degree in social justice online and in person. Learn more at wherefaithleads.com. Oklahoma has long been on the list of states that incarcerates a large percentage of its population. Prison conditions, such as overcrowding and mismanagement, are just a few of the public's concerns. One group, the People's Council for Criminal Justice Reform, is working to ensure someone is held accountable. Shonda Little has details.
For the last 3 years, a self-described group of ragtag activists have come together to form the People's Council for Criminal Justice Reform. The organization is small and tight-knit, with a laser-focused mission to dissolve the Oklahoma County Jail Trust and to improve the inhumane living conditions at the Oklahoma County Jail. As the jail trust adjusts with the newly appointed interim director, Brandy Garner, following previous director Jim Couch's controversial tenure and resignation, 3 members of the People's Council spoke on March 9th about the group's future goals.
My name is Sean Cummings, and I'm a member of the People's Council for Criminal Justice Reform. We are an activist group here in Oklahoma City. I like to call ourselves the Bad News Bears of activism. We all got together, and each one of us had a special talent, and we have been working against the jail trust in Oklahoma City to make a better place in the Oklahoma County Jail. The Oklahoma County Jail, or Oklahoma County Detention Center, as they renamed it, is actually run by a jail trust. They used to have a sheriff that was involved, and after having a few deaths year over year, they decided to get rid of him and put in this basically a board like you would have for a corporation to run the jail. Now, unfortunately, on that board were a couple of socialites, a few lawyers, and a couple of ex-has-been politicians. There was nobody that had any skill in running a jail.
From there, Cummings and his fellow activist, Nanette Cummings, no relation, and Sharice Baker say politicians appointed to the trust figured out how to profit from the trust, which was established in a manner that allowed little transparency. Sean Cummings says former House Representative Kevin Calvi was put in charge, and the situation then began to deteriorate.
He had been a House of Representatives, he'd been a county commissioner, and he and another person named John Michael Williams put together the contract that made this trust. Now, why is that important? Because it's almost impossible to get rid of the trust. The way these two gentlemen set it up and the county commissioner signed off on is the trust would have to fire themselves. Everybody would have to vote to get rid of themselves. And then the county commissioners would all three have to vote to get rid of them. And then the governor at this point, is Kevin Stitt, would have to sign off on it to get rid of the jail trust.
The People's Council strongly believes that the jail trust has operated unethically. The group alleges that the jail trust has accepted no bid contracts from their friends' companies, as the jail became infested with bed bugs and inmates were kept in their cells 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with few showers and inadequate food. Unexplained deaths piled up, regularly making state and national news.
So with that fear of not being fired or being sued or anything else, it's all on the county. What has happened is they have literally done favorable contracts for their friends, no bid contracts. Lots of things that not just are unseeming or dirty, just out and out illegal. They took loads of ARPA funds, which were government funds during COVID, and one-handed them off to the jail where they were supposed to go to everybody in the county. But the problem is the jail never got better. They left the same person in charge for 3 years. The deaths were off of the charts, and the place was absolutely filthy and was a house of horrors. This place became so unsafe, it was listed as the most dangerous jail in America. It had more deaths per capita than Rikers Island in New York. And that's just hard to understand.
Fellow People's Council member Nanette Cummings knows the pitfalls of the jail trust's poor operations on a personal level. Her son, who suffers from sickle cell disease, mental illness, and other health conditions, has been incarcerated at the Oklahoma County Jail for 2 years while awaiting trial. He's been hurt twice and cannot get regular exercise, which his mother says is detrimental to his chronic high blood pressure.
What we're doing is we're hurting cattle, not in a good way either. We're hurting people every single day that they're in an overfilled jail.
Nanette does not mince words when she states that her son and other inmates are seen as a payday.
Again, financial cost is heavy because if you look at, just say 1 week, if you start out, commissary comes in on a Wednesday. You pay for the meals, which is $100. You have to pay for paper. There are certain, you can send a pack of paper in, but you have to only send 20 sheets. So if they buy from the commissary, you have to put money out there for that. So that's like $25. So let's say you do the commissary, that's $400 for a month. And then you do $150 for commissary, like soap, shampoo, a comb, a toothbrush, because you have to switch that out. That stuff is not free. Then you turn around and you pay for phone service, which is another $200. So right there, I've just given you $850. So you do $850, you do the math, times 12. You think about how much money you just spent. That's a lot of money. That's a car payment, that's rent.
Like Nanette Cummings, Sharice Baker became involved with the People's Council for Criminal Justice Reform with her child's incarceration at the Oklahoma County Jail. Her son, Tyreek Baker, is an independent journalist who was arrested during the George Floyd protests.
He was looking behind those four walls in a jail just simply for exercising his constitutional rights. And that was very disturbing to me because, I had raised him to, have a voice and speak up for not only himself, but for the people around him. And to see him land in jail, not because of a murder, not because he was, out here selling drugs, not because he went out here robbing somebody, but simply for exercising his constitutional right and recording the actions of the citizens that were upset, along with the police, he was punished for that. And I made it a point at that time to get heavily involved because I could no longer stand on the other side, and I refused to be a victim.
Baker and her fellow activists believe that the jail trust received a disproportionate amount of federal COVID relief funds. Because of the structure that was established in the jail trust, the People's Council believes that following the massive funds flowing in and out of the jail trust is intentionally difficult. They find that especially concerning as Oklahoma County prepares to build a new jail. The People's Council vocally opposed the bond issue for the new jail when it went to a vote last year, stating that spending taxpayer funds on a new facility will not cure the root of the Oklahoma County Jail's true problems, the historically poor leadership of the jail trust and its enshrined lack of transparency. Cherokee County District Attorney Jack Thorpe has been appointed to present evidence of potential criminal misdeeds by the jail trust before a grand jury. Thorpe has been bringing witnesses before the impaneled grand jury for several months, but it is not yet determined if indictments will be returned or when the grand jury will be completed.
So I would definitely like to see the jail trust dissolved. I want to see those that have played a large role in participating in the dissolution of this jail even more, and the desecration of this jail. I would like to see indictments happen. I would like to see accountability be had, so that way people in the future understand that we are no longer going to accept them profiting off of us and filling their pockets up fat with the money that we work overtime and work hard to supply and put back into our economic structure.
The People's Council for Criminal Justice Reform is active on social media and encourages other concerned citizens to contact their elected officials to demand restorative justice reforms. The People's Council can be contacted through their Facebook page. For Focus, Black Oklahoma, I'm Shonda Little in Cheyenne.
In 2019, Tulsa Mayor G.T. Bynum announced a public investigation into potential mass graves of race massacre victims located at Oaklawn Cemetery. The documentary film, Oaklawn, produced by the Center for Public Secrets and Well Told, covers the events since that first announcement, and more broadly, the injustices Black Americans face daily, including government and policing. Charlie Chadwick has the story.
Oaklawn is a documentary film on the mass graves investigation of victims of the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre, presented by Tulsa's Center for Public Secrets. Oaklawn tells the story from the perspectives of members of the Public Oversight Committee and shares how it was established by the City of Tulsa Mayor's Office to oversee the investigation of mass graves connected to race massacre victims. The majority of the committee members are race massacre descendants, joined by local Black community leaders.
The first thing I said was, I want oversight. I want oversight not just from me, the only African-American city councilor on the council. I want the community to be heavily involved, because that's going to add legitimacy to the process and some level of trust.
This Public Oversight Committee was formed, according to city officials, to provide community engagement and transparency. However, the committee has been all but discarded. The committee started with public meetings, which are now private. Video conferences are left unrecorded and committee members excluded. The Oklahoma Open Meetings Act states meetings of public bodies shall be open to the public and that meetings conducted by video conference shall be recorded. Are the City of Tulsa and the Office of Mayor G.T. Bynum in violation of this act? Has Mayor Bynum abandoned the standards he himself established?
With one exception, all of the meetings since the centennial have been closed to the public. None of those meetings, there have been 5, are posted where people can see them. And most recently, we learned that the city has failed to record any of the meetings in 2022. So those meetings are lost forever to history. When the city says recording the meetings is not required, well, the Graves investigation itself was not required. The city is still compelled, in my view, based on Bynum's promises based on starting this investigation to do things the right way.
On June 27, 2019, Mayor Bynum announced the city's 1921 mass graves investigation. At this first Public Oversight Committee meeting, Bynum speaks conscientiously on the importance of justice and of treating the mass graves investigation as a homicide investigation, as well as declaring the need for a Public Oversight Committee. On December 20th, 2020, an excavation was announced. A mass grave had been located 18 months into the search at Oaklawn Cemetery. On June 1st, 2021, 100 years to the day of the race massacre, the first excavation began. This mass grave revealed 34 burials, with 14 of the coffins left untouched. 6 of those untouched were infants and children. The 20 remains that were exhumed supported the article from the Tulsa Tribune published on June 2, 1921, titled, "No Graves Dug, Bodies of 18 Negroes Held." Archaeologists were directed to unearth coffins of black males in plain wooden caskets. What they found in one victim's coffin would lead to the Oversight Committee becoming the Out of Sight Committee.
From the very beginning, you never saw that real concerted effort that could have made this more complete and I think could have instilled more trust in the process.
On June 23, 2021, an adult black male, labeled burial number 27, was exhumed. He was found to have multiple gunshot wounds, including a gunshot wound to the face with a bullet found in his skull. There was a second bullet found in his shoulder. This man, a murder victim, had not been killed by the Spanish flu. His death put blood on the hands of those that committed the massacre.
But nobody's thinking about what's happening in the minds of those people who are on the ground, who have taken this personally and said, we're looking for our ancestors.
Despite Mayor Bynum's June 2019 announcement, there was never a homicide investigation into his death. This man was found about 3 weeks into a contracted 6 to 8 week excavation, but within 24 hours of finding this victim, the excavation came to an abrupt halt.
That abrupt stopped, it looks really bad, and there is no commemoration that can fix it.
Their behavior is consistent with not expecting to find massacre victims. The sudden 24-hour shutdown is consistent with panic.
A little over a month later, on July 27, 2021, a 3-hour Public Oversight Committee briefing was held. As described in the film, the public and press were excluded, and there were no representatives from law enforcement. This private meeting has since been unlisted from the city's YouTube channel, and the city did not record the 4 Public Oversight Committee meetings held in 2022. This was the first time the meetings were closed to the public and press. The mayor made no allowances for the committee to approve the forthcoming significant changes to this investigation. The committee was not informed of many changes, such as excluding potential victims based on the hardware of the coffin or not exhuming women and children. The committee was also not given an opportunity to offer feedback on the early conclusion of the dig.
When you said when the excavation was over, if we are still saying, why are we considering the excavation to be concluded if there are yet more remains to be found?
At this meeting, the committee was told the reburial of these victims would be taking place in 3 days and that they would be buried in the same mass grave from which they were exhumed. The Public Oversight Committee unanimously agreed to delay this reburial. The committee was promised answers to their questions immediately, but no answers were ever given. Instead, committee members received an email stating the city would be proceeding with the reburial on July 30th, 2021.
The city said, well, we're going to rebury the remains Friday and have a ceremony. We were like, wait a minute, why are you doing that?
Why would you try to rebury remains that we don't even have a report on? We don't even know what's going on. It's too soon. The public needs to be aware of what's going on. This is the same ridiculous mess that we've been dealing with for 2 years, okay? And you guys continue to make decisions and act as if we have some kind of oversight committee.
No concessions were made for customary burial rituals at Oaklawn, and no invitations to attend the ritual were offered to the public or massacred descendants.
What you do for us, without us, you do it to us.
The gates to the cemetery were kept locked, while descendants were left without an opportunity to mourn.
They belong to us. No, we used to belong to them. We don't belong to them anymore.
Protesters made their discontent known. On July 28, 2021, a day after the private meeting, Chief Egunwale Amushan, a Public Oversight Committee member, asked why there was not a homicide investigation. The response he received was that this mass grave in Oaklawn Cemetery was not considered a crime scene.
We were told that this would be a murder investigation and that it would be handled as such. And I don't think that has been the case.
The city of Tulsa was offered 3 opportunities of support for their 1921 mass graves investigation. They rejected an early offer from Oklahoma State University. They denied help from the United States Air Force that would have provided equipment that penetrates highways, potentially providing the location of additional mass graves. There is plenty of oral history and local lore about mass graves under the highway, I-244, that now runs through Greenwood, and the interdispersal loop, which runs through Oaklawn. The city wanted to use the equipment themselves, but it would require trained operators from the United States Air Force, and they did not want to give away the rights to any findings, according to the documentary. The city also rejected an offer from Dr. Frederick Habert, a renowned archaeologist at National Geographic, to conduct an excavation with the same state-of-the-art equipment used on Jesus' tomb. Again, victims, descendants, and every citizen of Tulsa were denied this expertise and technological assistance.
I think the answer is one word: control. If it was turned over to any of these other groups, the city partially loses control.
An official records request was submitted to the city of Tulsa on November 1st, 2021 by Randy Hopkins, producer and lead researcher and interviewer for the documentary. Over 16 months later, no records have been released. Christy Williams, a massacre descendant and Public Oversight Committee member, received 2 group texts asking if she still wanted updates on the investigation. Christy encountered an issue in October 2022 at the second Oaklawn dig. She replied to an email requesting volunteers at the cemetery. However, when she showed up, she wasn't on the list. The documentary argues that after 85 years of denying the existence of mass graves, the city of Tulsa continues to keep hidden facts and findings of the massacre and continues to hinder justice for the victims, survivors, and descendants. My reporting details research used in the documentary. You can watch Oaklawn for yourself. The documentary is now streaming exclusively on Patreon. To find out more about Tulsa's 1921 mass graves investigation, go to centerforpublicsecrets.org and cityoftulsa.org. For Focus, Black Oklahoma, I'm Charlie Chadwick in Tulsa.
The term Black excellence has become mainstream in recent years, just as drag and drag culture have taken over our brunches and our Friday evenings. Jasmine Bivar-Toby shares the thoughts of global drag superstars and some local voices to get to the meaning of Black excellence.
RuPaul Charles is an iconic queer artist who has been climbing their way into mainstream pop culture since 2009 with their reality competition series, RuPaul's Drag Race. The title of the show is a play on drag queen and drag racing, and the title sequence and song, Drag Race, both share the theme. Premiering first in the United States, the franchise has now spread to more than 10 countries, including Holland, Australia, France, Spain, and Italy. In 2015, DragCon launched in LA to allow the fans to interact with their favorite drag performers, purchase merchandise, and be in the community with other superfans. As the convention has grown, there have been several major named sponsors hosting special events throughout the convention. This year at DragCon UK, digital storytelling app leader Audible hosted a panel on Black excellence. Drag queens Silky Nutmeg Ganache from the United States and Black Peppa from the United Kingdom sat upon lip-shaped couches with an intimate audience and shared their thoughts on Black excellence and their experiences being Black drag performers. First, we hear from Silky, then from Black Peppa.
Black excellence sometimes don't even have a voice. It's a look that you won't even notice or recognize, but other people are Black excellence. Black excellence is perseverance. Black excellence is hardships turned into love. Black excellence is knowing your place. Black excellence is creating a space where there isn't any. Black excellence is a burden, but Black excellence can be a joy, because I may not have had great days all the time, but baby, I feel that joy, that love now, and I am very appreciative of it.
To me, Black excellence is only going to be understood by someone that is obviously Black. We can all be unique in our own way, and we all go through our own struggles.
Dictionary.com defines Black excellence as a high level of achievement, success, or ability demonstrated by an individual Black person or by Black people in general. The term is often used to highlight and celebrate specific examples of such achievements and abilities. Others have defined it as a mindset backed by actions towards progress in our communities, transforming the phrase to a continuous action or even a lifestyle promoting Black love and solidarity. This broader view tends to address the systemic oppression that can inhibit Black excellence. We hear first from Colby Ari and then Devin Williams as leaders in the Tulsa community express their views on these two different definitions and the impact on Black people.
There's that old term, I think it's W.E.B. Du Bois, that talks about the talents of 10. And see, that's like this kind of problematic idea of what Black excellence is. It's this like secluded, small, very articulate realm of Blackness that has all of these talents, maybe multi-hyphenated and all of that. But like at the end of the day, like the fact that we are still surviving through all of what's working against us is more than enough. And the fact that we're working through all of that and trying to start businesses, trying to take care of ourselves through that very intentional idea of self-care, that's more than enough.
Black excellence is meritocracy. If you get an award, if you get an accolade, it's a lie and a rule that if Black people perform whiteness, then we will be safe. But the only thing Black excellence actually guarantees is momentary comfort. The excellence is not something that white people see first. It is the Black that they see first. And for me, when I am redefining Blackness and I am redefining Black excellence for myself and my other Black people, it will be, how do you revoke whiteness is Black excellence? How do you refuse whiteness is Black excellence? That is Black excellence for me going forward.
It is apparent that Black excellence may be in the eye of the beholder. It may be aspirational and also attainable. Kenneth Brent, musician and community organizer, shares his experience growing up Black.
Growing up in the Northeast, I was instilled that Black excellence from a young age. Go to school, get an education, go to college, graduate, get a good job, get a career. If you just work hard enough, you'll survive. Years later, I started to realize that everything that my mother and my father and my aunt and uncle instilled in me, those notions of Black excellence were really just, this is how you survive in the system. I'm only 33 years old, but yet I've been working for 20 years. Do the math. Is that Black excellence? What I think that Black excellence is a challenge to ourselves to be the best that we can be and show up authentically. So I think it's more or less decolonizing what we look at as Black excellence.
Cosmopolitan journalist Hannah Yosef wrote in their article entitled "Why I Am No Longer Caving to the Pressures of Black Excellence," quote, Perhaps Black excellence is something akin to an old friend. You look to it when you need a boost, but it's important to ensure you understand its many layers. Now, I feel more certain that to be excellent is to appreciate the efforts you've gone to rather than the results yielded. Blackness, however, is timeless. When the glow of success fades, I never want to forget my birthright and that I unapologetically belong in the room. End quote. Black excellence is multifaceted, from drag superstars to everyday community organizers and parents. As a people, this is a concept that can inspire or ignite depending on the intent and context. It is up to you to decide for yourself. For Focus, Black Oklahoma, I'm Jasmine Bivar Toby in London.
Focus Black Oklahoma is produced in partnership with KOSU Radio, Tulsa Artist Fellowship, and Tri-City Collective. Additional support is provided by the George Kaiser Family Foundation, the Charles and Lynn Schusterman Family Philanthropies, and the Commemoration Fund. Our theme music is by Moffett Music. Focus Black Oklahoma's executive producers are Quresh Ali Lansana and Bracken Klar. Our associate producers are Smriti Iyengar and Jesse Ulrich. You can visit us online at kosu.org or tricitycollective.com/Focus Black Oklahoma and on YouTube at Tri-City Collective. You can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Focus Black OK. You can hear Focus Black Oklahoma on demand for free at kosu.org, NPR One, npr.org, or wherever you get your podcasts.
KOSU Business Circle memberships are ideal for small businesses looking to support public radio and get a little bit of airtime. To learn how your business can become a member, email development@kosu.org.